Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to everybody. LA wins 143-135 to improve to 19-7. It is their first time winning consecutive games since late November. They had been up and down lately through that 3-3 stretch. Lakers are nothing if not dramatic. They have a propensity for these comebacks. This is their 7th double-digit comeback of the season, which is second most in the NBA. They also improved to 10-0 in clutch games. Shout out to everybody. Shout out to the chat. Iceberg says, salute Buha, the GOAT, and the chat and the mods. Yes, shout out to everybody. One quick thing on the mods. I know some people have reached out about some of the restrictions and stuff. Let me know if you get silenced or muted. But I think we're in a good place with the mods right now. But shout out to everybody. Let's get into the game here. So Buha's big picture is the Banshees strike again. And yes, Luka Doncic was incredible with 45 points, 11 rebounds, 14 assists, 5 steals. He was clearly the best player on the floor. LeBron nearly had his own triple-double with 28 points, 7 rebounds, 10 assists. Those guys carried LA's offense. But looking specifically at Jackson Hayes, Marcus Smart, Maxi Kleber, Jared Vanderbilt, and Jake LaRavia, I thought all 5 of those guys really contributed in a multitude of ways in terms of with Jackson, it was obviously the rim running and the lob threat. So no DeAndre Ayton, no Austin Reeves, no Gabe Vincent. Jackson gets the start, plays 22 minutes, and has 16 points. And continues this. He has not missed a shot against the Jazz as a Laker. Then you have Marcus, who continues to set a certain tone defensively with the starting group. Did foul out. It had some questionable fouls in terms of just like not needing to be so overly physical at times. But I've said this before, when it comes to fouling and when it comes to players being more physical versus less, especially for this group and this group not naturally playing with a certain level of motor or tenacity or physicality, I do like Marcus setting a certain tone. So he can toe the line and he can sometimes cross it, but he hit a bunch of threes as well. But right now I want to focus more so on the defense and the little things. And then looking at this bench group of, they played a ton of minutes together and were part of several runs in both the first half and the second half. But Maxi Kleber, they dust off the cobwebs and he gets a shot with no DeAndre Ayton. And once again in Utah, Maxi makes a contribution. And, again, the box score numbers with him are never going to stand out. Did have a block, but the Lakers were a team best plus 17 in Maxi's 19 minutes. With Vando, they were plus 15 in his 25 minutes. And with Jake LaRavia, plus 14 in his 28 minutes. Jake and Vando combined for 9 offensive rebounds. Jake had a couple putbacks off those. Vando was everywhere once again. This has been now back-to-back really impressive games from Vando. And I think it's becoming clear now that like the Lakers hierarchy or sort of the way that this group can be optimized and function around the primary offensive players is you need a combination of finishers and you need a combination of the dirty work guys who are crashing the offensive glass and putting pressure on the rim. And I think that has really stood out here in these last couple games against the Suns and the Jazz, where tonight 13 offensive rebounds for LA, a bunch of second chance opportunities. They ended up shooting the ball well at 53%, but there were stretches of this game they did not shoot the ball well. But I thought the bench and specifically some of the Banshees or just role players were able to make banshee-like plays and have some of the sequences that they had against Phoenix. There was no 24-0 run in this game, but they did go on that run to close the third and then another run to open the fourth. And it was just encouraging to see LA playing with a certain just motor and physicality that this group has not always played with, or maybe like one player is playing with, a couple players are playing with, but they had several lineups. Like there was the centerless group that went with LeBron, I believe it was LeBron, Vando, Jake, Marcus, and maybe Rui, or I know Adu was in there for a little bit, and just different combinations. But I think this has to be the pathway forward in terms of, like, look, they did not have a good defensive game, and I'm going to touch on the defense in a second. And there were certainly some things to be concerned about. Like the Lakers continue to come out flat in general, but especially flat off of these breaks where, opening night, All-Star break, anytime they have a multi-day break, the Lakers just come out flat. That is a tale as old as time. It's been going on for multiple years now where they just can't. Like some teams get rejuvenated with a break, the Lakers come out rusty and flat and out of rhythm. But so like I don't want to take away I don't know if there's too much to take away from this game in a macro sense, but for me, I think the thing moving forward is like we are now seeing what LA looks like when they are winning some of the margin things. Like tonight, they took really good care of the ball, which I'm going to touch on in a second as well. But like the offense rebounding, winning the possession game, and again, just like playing with a certain force out there, playing bigger lineups. I think that was one improvement to the rotation with no Gabe in particular, but also no Austin. Is you just see like with bigger lineups in general, with a bigger rotation, what this group can do. Now, granted, Utah, no Lauri Markkanen, like without him, they are a much smaller team and a much more perimeter oriented team. But I thought the Lakers just did, for the second straight game, did a really nice job of competing on the margins, winning some of those margins. And you see, I think moving forward around Luka, Austin, and LeBron, like you're going to have Ayton and Jackson locked in, but for the other spot or the other few spots, because obviously multiple guys are going to play, I think they really need to prioritize high motor players who are solid defensively and then also are contributing with the rebounding, with the cutting, getting out in transition, getting back in transition, just doing all these little things that I think have helped LA overcome some. In this one, more so shaky defense. In the Suns one, that was their worst shooting performance of the season, right? So we saw them win in a couple different ways. This was a shootout where they could not defend. The other one was a rock fight where they got it out the mud and won the game that way. But I think it's clear that guys like I don't think Maxi's going to be an every night rotation player, and I don't think he's good enough or young and spry enough to be an every night rotation guy. But when they've called on him, he has made an impact. Vando, I think, should be an every night rotation player moving forward. I think Jake, especially with this newfound, like he's been a good offensive rebounder all season, to be clear, but it does feel like the Lakers, JJ has unleashed the like crash the offensive glass and really make the teams pay, or the opponent pay. And I think that plays into Jake's strengths and has allowed him to play a little bit better over the last couple games. So I think this needs to be the blueprint moving forward in terms of like it's not going to be every night necessarily, and there's going to be some variance with the shooting and the defense and like the supporting cast can certainly be upgraded, right, in the form of a trade longer term. But for now, I think it's clear that guys like Marcus and Vando and Jake, and even Gabe had some good moments against Phoenix, but like the Banshees and the energy guys, the role players who can contribute on both sides of the ball, I think those are the guys that need to collectively play more. And now that we've seen a little bit of success with that, I don't think JJ can go back to the offensive-minded rotation or offensive-minded preferences that he has consistently had up to this point in the season. In terms of notable performers, I mentioned Luka Doncic, 45 points, 11 rebounds, 14 assists, 5 steals for Luka, 14 of 28 shooting, 4 for 12 on threes, 13 of 16 at the free throw line. Got off to like a little bit of a slow start by his standards. I think he continues to force some of the step back 3-point looks a little bit, that just like he hit 2 huge ones in the fourth, but I believe up to that point it was either 2 for 9 or 2 for 10. And a lot of those are heavily contested step backs coming out of pick and rolls and ISOs. So that's like the one thing, but Luka just continues to like this to me was probably this was definitely his best game since returning from Slovenia. It's probably his best game. I'm looking through his game logs here. This was probably his best game since the Clippers game, I would say. That probably the Clippers game. I would say probably the Clippers game. So in nearly a month, I would say at least 3 weeks for Luka, this was probably his best performance. And certainly, again, since having a second daughter, I thought this was his best performance. The 5 steals, like, really did a good job anticipating. Utah was pretty sloppy with the ball and had a bunch of errant passes, but Luka capitalized and just made a bunch of big plays down the stretch, especially in that fourth quarter. Had the couple of threes, had the lob to Jackson, had created several transition opportunities, made his free throws. So also had a couple of offense. He had a couple of pivotal offensive rebounds because those were like both off of I believe his own misses, his own misses where. He had the one where he missed it, got it back, and I think he got a layup, and then he had one where I think he created a kick-out opportunity off of that. But those came at pivotal times where like the game was sort of shifting away from the Lakers, and his knack for where the ball was going to be was pretty important. But I believe his 6th triple-double of the season leads the NBA in that, will continue to lead the NBA in scoring after this one, and really carried LA's offense tonight. Like, it continues to be when they are going through struggles or just kind of hitting a wall, stalling a bit. It's like, fine, Luka, let him cook. And I thought there was a little bit of a better balance in the second half compared to the first half, but 45, 11, and 14, he just continues to put up unreal numbers. LeBron had 28 points, 7 rebounds, 10 assists, 1 steal, a couple turnovers. Had a little bit of a rough patch late with that turnover out of the post where he didn't hear, I believe it was Collier coming from behind him to steal the ball. And then I thought took a couple rough shots. But the thing with LeBron that really stood out tonight for me was the 13 free throws. He was 12 for 13 at the free throw line. And this, to my recollection, had to be the game that he drove the most and got downhill the most. And part of that was a personnel thing. Like, Utah is the 29th ranked defense. They don't have anyone who can physically really match up with LeBron. Like, Filipowski is too slow. Everyone else is too small or too weak. So LeBron always had a matchup advantage with whoever was guarding him. But I thought he did a really nice job of getting downhill, putting pressure on the rim. And this right now, I think he's still continuing to find his jumper. He was 0 for 5 on threes, which means by some quick math, 8 for 12 inside the arc. And inside the arc, I think he's getting largely everything he wants. He's hitting pull-up jumpers. He's operating in the post. LA was going to the post early with LeBron and with Luka. So LeBron, like, I think inside the arc, and especially like the finishing, getting to the rim, again, getting downhill, that has been trending in the right direction. The final step for him will be getting his legs fully back in terms of the jumper. That has not been there reliably. But even if he does have to shift toward playing more like a big man, or just not taking as many perimeter jumpers or threes, I think that's okay ultimately too, because he is such an elite finisher. And again, continues to look more comfortable getting downhill. Jackson, I mentioned 16 points, 7 for 7 shooting. Nurkic was able to push him around a little bit on the offensive end in terms of Nurkic on the offensive end. Nurkic had 4 offensive rebounds, but Jackson ultimately, like, it was a little bit of a rough start for him, but Jackson ultimately, I think, won that matchup. And you saw with his own offensive rebounding and just the lobs and the rim running and the ability to, like, pressure the paint and really collapse the defense that way, or just sneak behind the defense. I thought that was really encouraging to see from him, and also had didn't have technically had a. I thought he had a block, but I guess they logged him as not having a block, but had a couple nice verticality plays around the rim. Marcus is always a wild ride. 17 points, 4 rebounds, hit 5 threes. Similar to San Antonio, they were often putting bigs and or just playing off of him, but Marcus made them pay, and he got into a certain rhythm again. Was 1 for 2 inside the arc, but I think like hit some big threes, because I believe he had a couple in the fourth, and LA really needed those. Did foul out, and I thought was a little bit too aggressive at times, but he. As I say, Marcus giveth and Marcus taketh, and I think he gives more than he takes overall. But he can be a frustrating player at times. Rui, 13 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, hit a huge 3, very reminiscent of the Toronto game, where I mentioned LeBron was like a little shaky late, other than his free throws, but he also hit Rui, like could have driven the ball, could have taken a jumper. Swings it to Rui in the corner. Rui cashes it, that left corner. So Rui 6 for 10. Efficient night for him. I think defensively, this is just a really tough matchup for him, because LA's first quarter was a disaster class, and Rui was a big culprit. Like, first play of the game, gets back cut. The Lakers are switching a couple of screening actions. He gets back cut, gives up a dunk. And I thought he really struggled defensively for more so in the first half. I thought he was better in the second half, but this is just a really tough matchup for him. And I think it, like a team that just moves a lot, there's just not much he could do when he's being put on perimeter guys. I already mentioned Maxi came in, I thought gave them some decent minutes off the bench. Vando, 7 points, 11 rebounds. He hit a 3. Jusuf Nurkic was ignoring him and looked him off, and Vando hit that 3, had another one that he missed. Overall, 3 for 7. You did see some of the finishing limitations with him, of just, when he gets, I believe he missed 1 3. So I think the other 3 misses were all around the rim. That continues to be a little bit of a concern with him, but the way he was defending and the way that he was disrupting, and the way that he's rebounding right now, you just can't keep this dude off the floor. And again, I think this was not as good as the Phoenix game, but this was still a really impressive performance. And then Jake LaRavia had 12 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 offensive rebounds, hit a couple threes, had a couple putbacks. I just thought a really solid performance from him. And then Dalton, Adu Thero, Nick Smith each got 1 shift. Dalton missed his 3. Adu missed a couple of shots around the basket. And then Nick Smith missed a couple of threes. So that was really it. Not much to take away, I think, from any of those guys. In terms of stat of the night, for me, it's 7 turnovers. LA only had 1 turnover in the first half and 6 in the second half. That is about as good as it gets. I believe this was a season low in turnovers, if I'm not mistaken. Quickly checking on Basketball Reference here. I believe the previous one had been 8. Let's see. 9. The previous low had been 9 against New Orleans. So, yeah, a season low, 7 turnovers for LA. That's incredible. Then it also led to them being plus 10 in field goal attempts. Part of that was the free throw battle. I will note, Utah left a lot of points on the board. They were just 31 for 47 at the free throw line, 66%. They missed 16 free throws, whereas LA was 32 at 39, 82%. And look at Jusuf Nurkic in particular, 4 for 11, but it wasn't just him. Ace Bailey was 2 for 6. Collier was 5 for 7. So, and then, several other guys missed at least 1. So, yeah, Utah left a lot of points on the board in this one, but LA, I thought, did a really good job battling in the possession game and creating some margin. And then I'm going to go through these 3 takeaways really quickly, because again, I don't think we learned that much from this game. I think it's been a lot of the same in terms of LA's offense carrying them, LA's stars carrying them, and LA's defense being somewhere between terrible to just subpar, and them still getting by against some of these below 500 teams. So takeaway number one for me is the Vando Maxi combo was something that stood out to me in terms of the optimal way to use Vando. And this was something I talked about a bit earlier in the season when I would get the questions about Vando and why he was out of the rotation, or what would be the best way to use Vando. One of the things I had noted was Vando has looked his best offensively as a 5. And tonight there was plenty, like, because of who was out, no DeAndre, and Jackson only played 22 minutes. There was some small ball minutes, and there was a lot of Vando and Maxi minutes together. And while Maxi was the 5 defensively, Maxi's more of a floor spacer and more of a perimeter player offensively. So that balance with Vando and Maxi, I thought is ideal, because you can have Maxi guard centers and then put Vando wherever you want to put him, whether it's on a guard or a wing or whoever. And then offensively, you have Vando as the primary screener. And if you're running 4 out, 1 in, Vando is the 1 in guy, and then everyone else is spacing the floor. So that's, I think, the difference in the Vando Maxi combination versus the Vando Jackson combination or the Vando Ayton combination. The Vando Jackson combination was okay against Phoenix. It had been terrible all season. And I had mentioned that JJ had mentioned that was a reason why he was not playing Vando, and that it's tough to like find those minutes without another center on the floor when the Lakers have more than enough center minutes between Ayton and Jackson. Like you easily get to 48, but between those two, right? Like Ayton's playing 30 to 32, Jackson's playing 16 to 18. Boom, you're at 48. So that they're not playing a lot of minutes without a traditional center on the floor, and neither one of their traditional centers can space the floor. But Maxi is the exception here, because Maxi he's basically a stretch 4 turned into a center, or a 4 who's evolved into a 5 in older age. And I thought that matchup or that pairing worked really well together. And I think that is not something we're necessarily going to see a lot moving forward, because again, once Ayton and Hayes are back, I think that they're going to take up basically all 48 minutes at the 5 spot. But I think if there are ways to get Vando and Maxi on the floor together, or if there are ways to get Vando on the floor in smaller groups, like, I think that's the optimal way to use him, because you don't run into the same spacing concerns, in my opinion. I do think there's a difference when it's Ayton or when it's Hayes out there versus when it's Maxi or a small ball look. So I thought Vando continues to, just continue to look his best offensively as the primary guy in the fray. But again, you just like, you don't want to sideline DeAndre Ayton or Jackson Hayes, who are both much better finishers and actual lob threats, just to fit in Vando. But it is a balancing act, and it's something that the coaching staff has to continue to figure out. Takeaway number 2 is LA's defense remains a real concern. Like there were plenty of bright spots where, again, Luka had maybe his best performance in nearly a month. LeBron got downhill. The role players all contributed. Several guys made, like, this was a real team win in the sense of it felt like most of the group contributed in the fourth quarter in some capacity. Again, with Luka hitting the big threes, Marcus hitting a couple threes, Jackson with the late lob, Rui with the late 3, LeBron with that assist, also making his free throws, getting downhill. He was part of some of the defensive runs. Vando with the offensive rebounding and defense. Jake with the offensive rebounding. Also, I believe hit a 3 in the fourth as well. So like everyone contributed to some degree. The issue is the Lakers continue to just be like a bit of a train wreck on the defensive end. And when they're playing this type of team, they just have to keep it close and then they can close it out. Like tonight, they were bad defensively for basically 2 and like a half to 2 and like 3/4 of the third quarter. Turned it on late in the third, rode that into the fourth, and won the game. But I mean, they gave up 41 in the first quarter. They gave up 78 in the first half, which was the most they've given up in a half this season. And it was at like every possible level in terms of not getting back in transition, not stopping dribble penetration, getting back cut, losing guys around screens, giving up offensive rebounds, not rotating properly, not closing out properly. It was just like textbook, like every single thing you could do wrong defensively, the Lakers did for 2.5 quarters. And the Jazz are bad enough, and especially not having Lauri Markkanen, like the Lakers were able to get away with this. But sometimes with these types of performances, I feel like it can almost reinforce some bad habits with LA, where again, a game that I've referenced before that this one kind of reminded me of was the Charlotte game, where LA just didn't really try in the first half and sort of mailed it in, had a great third quarter, and then kind of went back to not really trying in the fourth. This one, like Utah really tested them deep into the third, and then, still had the lead going into the fourth and early on. But I think LA continues to play a bit with their food and play with fire a bit in terms of just, like, I think if this were a different opponent, this game could have gone differently. Now that, we're not going to get into like theoreticals and hypotheticals here. I'm just stating that like the Lakers have been a bottom 4 defense going on the past 11 games. I would assume off of this performance, they will continue to rank as a bottom 4 defense over the past 12 games now. And that continues to be like the glaring yellow to red flag with this group right now, is like they are really struggling to defend. And against bad teams, they could lock in for 5 minutes here, 4 minutes here, 3 minutes here, and like get the win because their offense is so great. But against like Houston next week, they cannot play like this. If they play like this against Houston, they will lose that game by 20 plus. So they got to be careful here. And even the Clippers, I think like they've had a bunch of, they continue to lose, but like you got to come correct against better teams. That's just my point here. And then takeaway number 3 before we get into the Q&A. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, kind of. And what I mean by that is I thought the Lakers really missed DeAndre Ayton and Austin Reeves tonight. With Austin, that was a big chunk of scoring and playmaking out of the lineup, and the Lakers could really only go like 7.5, 8 deep with guys that JJ was comfortable playing. So I thought Austin, we've seen like the on-off with Austin. When he's off, the Lakers are a worse team. He and Marcus continue to trade places in terms of the most impactful player with on-off and net rating and whatnot. But they really missed Austin tonight. They also really missed DeAndre because Jackson and Maxi both struggled with foul trouble. Both were pushed around a bit at times. Jackson had some good rim protection moments, but he was physically pushed around by Nurkic. Maxi, I thought there's just a foot speed issue or limitation with him, where in transition or rotating on the back line, like there are just some limitations in terms of his ability to protect the rim and protect dribble penetration. I thought the Lakers really missed DeAndre Ayton in his rim protection, his defense, and of course his offensive contributions as a finisher and also as a short roll scorer and playmaker. The one guy I don't think they missed tonight is Gabe Vincent. And I thought we saw a different, like, for as bad as the Lakers defense was tonight, I thought that playing a larger rotation, like with the exception of Nick Smith and technically Marcus Smart, though Marcus Smart plays above his size, like everyone they played tonight was 6'7" and bigger, 6'6" and bigger. And again, Marcus guards up really well. So Marcus, I continue to say, is like he's the biggest 6'3" player in the league because he's basically 235 pounds. So he's not, he weighs like 20 to 30 pounds more than the typical guy his size, if not even more. And then everyone else obviously was 6'6", 6'7" and above, depending on how you want to clock Laravia and connect. So I think we saw like the foot speed was an issue, and the ball containment was an issue, but the Lakers did not have anyone to really pick on in terms of like size mismatches, right? Like Nurkic was able to bulldoze his way, get some offensive rebounds, Filipowski as well. But outside of that, I thought LA did, they really leveraged their size well. And I think that's something they've been able to do the last couple of games. And I think moving forward, my takeaway is like, okay, so they're probably going to stick with the starters. It's going to be Ayton, LeBron, Rui, Austin, Luka. Marcus is locked in. Jackson is locked in. I think Jake's locked in. I think Vando should be locked in moving forward. Then that 10th spot should, in my opinion, be what do we need tonight? Do we need Gabe? Do we need Adu? Do we need Dalton? Do we need Maxi? Like that could be a little bit more of a rotation. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. I think Gabe is obviously like earned a certain role with JJ, but I thought it did stand out that there was no like, they certainly picked on guys. I don't want to deny that they didn't pick on guys defensively, but it was more of a foot speed thing rather than, hey, where's this small guy? Let's like, shoulder check him and shoot over him the way that Gabe is often targeted. So that's why I say absence makes the heart grow fonder, kind of, because I thought the Lakers really missed 2 of their 3 rotation players tonight. But one of the guys I thought looked kind of expendable. And I think as kind of this trend of the banshees, I think it's banshees with size. That is the big thing here. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A. I see we got a few super chats. Musel K 420, thank you for the super chat. Hey Jovan, Lakers can't guard threes and their bench sucks at scoring. Yeah, I don't disagree with either of these points. I think the 3-point defense is more emblematic of LA's lack of foot speed and lack of processing. Like I think what's funny is I think the Lakers have a lot of smart players, and I think a lot of their intelligence shines through on the offensive side. But I feel like collectively the group goes from like one of the smartest offensive teams in the league to like one of the most questionable defensive teams in the league in terms of their pattern recognition, in terms of their processing, decision-making, communication, and to some degree also like effort and motor. But yeah, I mean, the 3-point defense has been bad all season. There's certainly some like shot luck with that people with the Lakers will point to. My pushback is like, I just think they're bad at like, they don't guard the 3-point line. How many open threes did Utah have tonight? The data from the game isn't up yet, but they had a bunch of open threes, and there were several possessions where, one of the benefits to not being in the arena is going back and being able to rewind and see kind of some of the breakdowns. And it's just so many communication errors from this team, which like on one hand, maybe makes you optimistic that they could shore that up. On the other hand, they just had like 2 defensive centric practices about their defense, about their 3-point defense, about needing to be better on this side of the ball. And they came out and laid an egg with frankly, one of their worst defensive performances of the season. And, I would say definitely up there for worst defensive performance in a win this season. It's in the short list of like top 2 or 3 worst LA defensive performances in a win this season. So I agree. The bench scoring I've talked about, part of it is the roster construction and rotation construction of like, okay, let me read you this list and tell me who's supposed to be scoring. Maxi Kleber, Jared Vanderbilt, Jake LaRavia, Dalton Connect, Adu Thero, Nick Smith. Nick Smith and Dalton Connect have had big games this season offensively, but when Luka and LeBron and Austin will be back soon, when those guys are out there, though, like there's a reason why those guys often have had their bigger games when usually 2 of the stars are out or everyone's out, like that Portland game, right? It's different when Luka's there and when LeBron's there and when Austin's back. There's just no usage for an on-ball creator like a Nick Smith, or even a Dalton is like way lower in the pecking order. So the one guy off the bench that cracked double figures was Jake LaRavia with his 12. Part of that was doing some of the dirty work with a couple of putbacks off offensive rebounds. Also hit a couple of threes, got to the free throw line late. But, I don't. They don't have scorers off the bench, so that part, like, I don't know like what angle you're coming at this with, but the one thing I like, sometimes I feel like when people talk about LA's bench, it's through the lens of like almost like blaming people, and I'm like, well, they just don't have bench scorers. So if you want to like point the finger at anyone, I think that's actually a roster construction issue. The one thing you can change is moving Rui to the bench, starting Marcus or starting Vando or whoever, leaning into the defense with that fifth spot with the starters, and then having Rui come off the bench as more of an offensive-minded player. But other than that, you're not like, Jared Vanderbilt, Jake LaRavia, like these guys are not like, they're going to be up and down offensively. And there's a level of volatility with that I think you just have to accept. Muse okay, 420. Thank you for the super chat again. LA should make trades right now. Will be good for chemistry. It's certainly possible that they make a trade here within the next couple of weeks. Going back to last year, they made the DFS trade. I believe it was December 29th or 30th. We're kind of past, like there was the one window with the 15th and 16th where players who are traded could be reaggregated right before the deadline. We are past that. So now anyone who's traded cannot be traded again before the deadline. The one thing I'll note is right now, I think he's out of LA's price range, but Herb Jones is probably like the best realistic target that's like potentially available. We don't even know for sure if he's available, but potentially available. The one thing with Herb is because of his contract situation, he cannot be traded until January 14th. So if you're LA, I'm not saying they can't make a smaller move and make a bench type move. Like if you could flip Dalton in a second for Keon Ellis, I would do that in 0.001 seconds. But in terms of the bigger move, if they are waiting for Herb or waiting for New Orleans to potentially reconsider and drop their price, that can't happen until January 14th. So I think they probably want some more clarity with that situation before. And then there's also the whole Giannis situation. And that for any team that has a theoretical shot at Giannis, you have to weigh that of if you want to wait to see where that goes and if you want to give up a pick or whatnot. So there's a lot that LA has to consider that to me makes it less likely that they make an immediate move and probably wait to see where the market goes. But again, they strike in silence. So there's certainly a chance that happens. Muso K420 again. Did you see Herb and Trey versus the Rockets? Man, if LA could. I was watching the game, so I'm aware of what happened. I know they beat the Rockets in overtime. Herb had 8 steals in that game. So Herb's been playing great basketball since returning from injury, and Trey continues to ascend. Yeah, I had, yeah. So yeah, I mean, I like both those guys. I just don't, unless you're trading Austin, which I don't even know if Austin would be enough for New Orleans. And I also don't think LA would want to do that. So as we talked about today on Lakers Collective, I think if you're trading Austin, it has to be for someone on his level or higher, and not like a 2 for, like, I think there's a longer term, as much as I like Herb and Trey and as much as I like them together, then you still need eventually that second star next to Luka. And I don't think Trey is quite at that level. Bowen, thank you for becoming a member. I appreciate it. Shout out Bowen. I hope to see you at a game soon. Xavier, is the losing streak the only way JJ changes his starters? Yeah, or a trade. I think that's, I am like coming around to the idea that I know some people have floated it out there, and I'm never one to be like, hey, trade a player because the coach likes him too much. I think that's a bit of an overreaction, especially if the player is good and has value, but Rui and Gabe and their roles are testing that a little bit, in my opinion. Again, I mean, the Lakers, I sound like a broken record, and I just the starting group continues to lose. This was a different starting group, but like there are just too many holes out there defensively, and really the only candidate that's realistic. I know people have mentioned LeBron going to the bench. People have mentioned Austin going to the bench. The only person that is going to potentially go to the bench would be Rui. And I think that's the low hanging fruit here, but JJ continues to see it differently, and LA continues to win in spite of the starting group, not because the starting group. I think that's a key distinction, but I mean, I think a multi-game skid would probably be the one path to LA changing the starting lineup. Otherwise, I think JJ is going to continue to roll with it. And I do think long-term it's something that will have to be changed. And if LA, again, they're the only like team in their stratosphere that continues to start a negative lineup for whatever reason, but it is what it is. I've talked about it ad nauseum. I'm kind of over the starting conversation just because it does not seem to be changing unless a trade is made. Nala, thank you for the super chat. Only thing Gabe would have helped with was screen navigation. When Luka and Rui get screened, they end up at half court somehow. Yes, that's a good point. And Gabe, this matchup, like Gabe could have probably helped a little bit more than I was indicating. I think to your point, his screen navigation is good. I think there is just a component of like, I feel like you notice Vando and Jake and Marcus out there more in a positive way. Sometimes you notice Gabe in a negative way, and those guys all have their own drawbacks, right? Like Jake can go through stretches where he's too passive offensively and or just like missing open threes or even layups. He's been struggling with finishing lately. Vando, we know about his extensive offensive limitations. It does influence how you build lineups with Vando. Like he's one guy that you have to like, there's some guys you have to protect defensively. Vando, you have to protect offensively. If you don't put the proper players around Vando, especially against better competition, you could get into a tough situation. And then Marcus, pure chaos, turnovers, shot selection, fouling, whatever. But those guys all also bring something like very tangible and just impactful to the rotation that I don't think Gabe has consistently done recently. And I just think like he is a solid defender, but he's being paid and asked to do more than that. And right now he has not shown he can consistently do more than that. So my point is, I just think based on performance, he should be more of a fringe rotation player, especially with the way Vando is reemerging right now. And I don't think that's going to happen because I think JJ values Gabe's shooting and he values Gabe's defense and sort of like professionalism and leadership and communication out there, which I totally get to a degree. I just also think that the Lakers have clearly played better when they're bigger. And if you have a certain amount of, you have like the center spot locked in pretty much for 48 minutes with Ayton and Hayes. Then you also have some of the core guys locked in with LeBron and Luka and Austin, and to a lesser degree, like Marcus and Rui and Jake. Then when it comes to that like final spot or so in the rotation, I think a guy like Vando has like, I just would rather err on that side than the Gabe side. Jeffrey, thank you for the super chat. The current defense seems unfixable. So do we need at least 2 3-and-D players to compete with OKC? Is this feasible? Thanks. I've come more around to that side in terms of LA probably needing multiple changes. Now, I almost view adding Vando as like Vando was out of the rotation for several weeks. And now like this version of Vando, I still will contend. I think he's playing better than he did earlier in the season. So I think he was out of the rotation for too long, and we've talked about that before in terms of like they needed to give Vando or Adu some run and not lean too much into the offensive side. but I think he's playing better. And my point with that is like maybe Vando and this version of him can almost function as like LA adding that player into the rotation, and maybe if it is as simple as, hey, can you go get a Herb Jones or whoever's your ideal fifth starter, and if that player is there, and then your bench is Rui, Marcus, Jake, Vando, Jackson, that, you know, with Marcus and Jake and Vando together, let's even throw in Jackson as sort of like a bench mob. That's pretty interesting. Ideally, they add probably another player, and I think, like, I think the best outcome for LA that I think is like semi plausible. I don't want to say is likely, to be clear, but if they could swing Herb Jones and Keon Ellis, I think they could use the fifth starter and another bench perimeter guy who's a little bit quicker. Like, that's still kind of like, I think Vando has probably looked better. Vando's looked better off the ball in like a wreaking havoc chaos role, and it's probably looked a little bit better against wings compared to guards, in my opinion. I don't think he's fully back athletically. And then Marcus has tended to guard up better than guard down. So I think if there was a way to add, again, Herb Jones and Keon Ellis are probably like the home run outcome here. I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but those player archetypes of like a 1 through 3 defender as the starter, and then probably like a 1 and 2 defender as the, you know, bench edition. That to me, like if you have Keon Ellis, Marcus Smart, and Vando together, that's when you're cooking with something defensively. And if it's like, you know, LeBron and DA, let's just say this is a hypothetical lineup. I mean, you are relying a lot on LeBron offensively, so maybe you change that up. But like that, I could see being a lineup that could hang with OKC, at least from a defensive perspective. I'm with you in the sense of, I think they just don't have the proper defensive personnel, and they're really slow. And if you have like pretty much everyone they play has a speed advantage over them, but it's like if you have enough of a speed advantage over them, right? Like Phoenix is kind of borderline with it. They certainly have guys who are quick, and when they were able to turn the Lakers over, that got them in transition, and that's why they blew them out. But like we saw when LA was able to slow the game down, Phoenix's offense didn't really have enough shot creation and dribble penetration to really puncture the Lakers defense consistently outside of that crazy fourth quarter. With Utah, I mean, Keontae George has killed LA in all 3 games. Collier has also hurt them. But that's just a different caliber of perimeter force. The OKCs, the Denvers, the Houstons, the San Antonios, those are just, you know, different caliber of opponent that I think LA will struggle with defensively. So, I think they need to add 1 to 2 players ideally to the roster, and I don't know what the ceiling is defensively at that point, but right now the floor is pretty low, and the floor is, I mean, what we're going on now, the Lakers have played 26 games, and they had the rough defensive start. They had a better stretch kind of in the middle, and now they've gone back to being a bad defense. So, I mean, you could argue, if you kind of separate it from like the beginning of the season and the recent 12-game stretch, for over half the season, they've been a bottom 5 defense. Like, that's just not going to cut it. That is too, and this is the point I make when we talk about contenders or where LA's in the West. No other team has a weakness as bad as LA's weakness right now. Like, Denver's defense is shaky, but it's still better than the Lakers. And when they have Gordon and Brown, it's been a top 2 defense. Like, San Antonio's defense has slipped recently, but it's largely been because Wemby's been out. When Wemby's on the floor, they have the second best defense as well. So, and then, you know, Denver's best offense in the league, San Antonio's 6th in offense, Houston's top 3 on both sides, OKC's top 5 on both sides. So, like, you just look at those teams, and they're much more complete on both sides of the ball right now. And that's like the challenge that LA has to make up. Truthster, thank you for the super chat. Appreciate the question here. I was listening to Lakers Collective earlier, and I noticed you seem to be the most down on the Lakers between you three. Is that fair to say? I would disagree with this respectfully. I said, so I would, we kind of joked about this throughout the show, but like Trevor was actually the most down on the Lakers. Jason said the Lakers are contenders, and then he added like a bunch of caveats to it. I said they're fringe contenders, and the way to elevate to being contenders would be making a trade, and also in the short term, changing the starting group, changing the rotation a bit, and then later on making a trade. And then Trevor actually just straight up said that the Lakers are not contenders because of their net rating, and that, you know, he thinks they have the upside to be a contender. Now, I think one thing we talked about today on the show, because I think someone else had a comment about like that he felt like Jason was the most positive or the most fair, and that me and Trevor were being more negative. I think one thing to remember, like we largely, I would say we view things like 90% similarly, if not even more. Like we're all very, I think we're all very much on the same page with most Lakers things, as you hear on the show. But if Jason's making a certain point or Trevor's making a certain point, I'm not just going to follow that point up by making the same point. So sometimes just depending on the topic, depending on the way that we're answering questions, one of us might go and be a little bit more positive, and then maybe the other one's going to provide the counterpoint or the counter argument. So, sometimes I maybe find myself more on like the counterpoint, counter argument side, but I do try to also preface that by saying like, hey, I agree with what Jason just said. I echo it, whatever. But like, this is also another wrinkle or another element to this whole situation. So I would not say I'm the most down, but if that's the interpretation, then like you're entitled to that. But I did say the Lakers are fringe contenders. And I actually think even with Jason saying they're contenders, I have the Lakers higher on my contender list than Jason has on his, at least his most recent contender list on Hoops Tonight. So I think you could actually argue I'm the most optimistic on the Lakers. But I would say I'm probably most pessimistic on their defense, maybe. Like I think the defense is a real thing, and I'm probably hardest on the starting group, I would say. But I don't think I'm the most pessimistic. I actually think I might have the Lakers higher than either of them in an actual like contender ranking. Nala, thank you for super chat. Brett Siegel said Pell's asking price is 2 firsts. Said we could get creative in a consolidation trade to get more picks to avoid the Stepien rule. Thoughts? Yeah, I mean, this is what I've tried to say. Like, the Pelicans have had a high asking price for Herb and for Trey. And I believe this is not the first time it's come out. They've wanted 2 firsts for Herb. And I think the asking price for Trey, I think over the summer it came out like they want 2 firsts for Herb. For Trey, they want like a blue chip stud young player and 2 picks or 2+ picks for Trey. So the Pelicans, despite making one of the more head scratching trades of the millennium with the Derek Queen trade, and that, like, I really like Derek Queen, but that just was an indefensible decision on their part. They continue to have a high asking price for Murphy and Herb. And I get it, because I think those guys probably have the most positive trade value. Like, especially Zion is still a name, and Zion is still productive when healthy, but he's never healthy. And there are some real conditioning and like culture questions with that, right? And also, if you're trading for Zion, like you're trading for him to you're not trading for Zion to bring him off the bench. You're not trading for Zion to be in like a smaller role. You're probably trading for Zion to be like a top 2 player on your team. And that comes with certain expectations and you needing certain things from Zion. Whereas Trey and Herb, much lower expectations in terms of a potential trade for them. So I'm not surprised by this. Now, what you want in a trade versus what you get in a trade are 2 totally different things. Like last year, Brooklyn really wanted a first for Dorian Finney-Smith. And for a moment, it looked like Memphis was potentially going to give that up, or maybe a protected first. And it ended up working out where LA gave up 3 seconds, and that ended up being the DFS trade. I mean, it's come out since that Dallas was asking for more than 1 first in the Luka trade. They wanted Austin Reeves. They wanted Dalton Connect. They wanted an extra first-round pick. And Pelinka was able to negotiate it down because of the uncertainty with Luka's contract situation and if he'd want to stay in LA. So what you want for a player and what you get for a player are 2 different things. I want to make that clear. I want to make that distinction. However, I mean, New Orleans just doesn't have to trade him. Like, that's an option. I don't think, like, that's been a thing that I've talked about before, is like they're probably on like a new timeline, and it should be a Queen and Fears timeline. But there's no reason why Trey Murphy and Herb Jones can't also fit that timeline. Like, I could envision in the future, let's say they get out of the Zion business, they get off DeJounte Murray, they get off, I'm forgetting what other money that Jordan Poole, like, get out of all that. In like 2 years, you could see a lineup with like Derek Queen, a really good 4, like in you know, like almost like a Jaren Jackson type, or I think they need like kind of a unicorn forward who could protect the rim and space the floor. But, you know, whatever, like that archetype of player, Murphy, Jones, and Fears, and that could be a really good lineup in like 2 to 3 years. So I don't think they have to give up Herb. I think it's more of they probably have to be blown away. Now, in terms of getting creative for a consolidation trade, it's very much the beholder type situation. Like, I don't think they're flipping the expirings for a first. I don't think they're flipping Dalton for a first. I don't think they're flipping Adu for a first. I think the one guy they could potentially flip for a first, depending on the team, depending on the context, would be Rui. But Rui's also making $18 million. And, you know, I guess it depends on like the salary of just like what that looks like in terms of an actual trade. Maybe they're doing a 3-team trade where Rui gets sent to the 3rd team. The 3rd team sends an extra pick to the Pelicans, and the Lakers also send a pick to the Pelicans. Like, that is an option here, but they don't really have a lot of, like, they can get creative, but they don't have a lot of assets that are actually worth a first. And I would even argue like Rui's very much a team by team player in terms of his fit. And I think a lot of teams like Rui. I don't know how many teams would actually give up a first for Rui. That to me is not very clear right now. So it's certainly possible they could get creative and find a way to get an extra pick. I think it's going to be a tall task, and I think it's pretty unlikely. So I think realistically, if they are able to swing a Herb trade, a Wiggins trade, whatever, it's probably going to be with the 1 first. And I don't know if they could get that second one. Kaylin, thank you for the super chat. Thoughts on the officiating tonight? Probably the worst we've dealt with. Also, do you think some refs may genuinely not like officiating Luka Braun teams? Yeah, the officiating was not. I mean, look, the Keontae George 3. I don't know how they reviewed that, or, you know, the 3-shot foul against Rui. I mean, I don't know. That one was insane. I mean, you could argue it was a foul, but he also traveled and like didn't even get a shot up. I believe they were in the penalty, but then that, to me, that wouldn't have been a shooting foul. That would have been more of a 2-shot foul, but you know, whatever. It was not a good ref game. I mean, look, they both teams combined for what, 86 free throws. There were a combined 60 fouls. That's just ugly basketball. That's an ugly game from an officiating perspective. I do think the Lakers fouled a lot tonight, and I think the lack of ball containment and perimeter defense just led to a bunch of Utah getting downhill and drawing fouls. But it was not the best ref game. I do think in general the Lakers get a pretty neutral to even positive whistle, and so I know like when it's bad, it obviously stands out, but like I do think the Lakers typically, I think all things considered, they come out again in a more like neutral to positive way with the refs in terms of like foul calls and that stuff. But certainly, I to your point, like, I mean, 47 free throws for Utah is a lot for anybody, and that was probably a little bit too high. In terms of the last part here, I think that's an interesting part because LeBron has been vocal for years, at least since I've covered him in LA, that he gets a bad whistle, and I actually agree with that. I think LeBron generally gets a pretty bad whistle, and it's kind of like the Shaq Giannis situation where because those guys are so big, strong, quick, powerful, that kind of works against them sometimes with the refs, and they just don't. LeBron will get clobbered in the head on a drive and they just won't call it. And then, other guys drive and maybe grift into it or just don't have the same level of contact and they get to go to the free throw line. So I think with LeBron, I understand some of his frustration. With Luka, we know he gets pretty impassioned with the refs and has been among the league leaders in texts before. Not as much this season. I think he's been better with that, with the general, complaining and berating the refs. But Luka is on the refs a lot, especially when he feels like there is contact and he doesn't get the foul call. Even sometimes when he does get the foul call, he'll still go at them, right? So I think we have to remember, like, these guys are humans. And I remember covering the Lob City Clippers earlier in my career, and refs legitimately hated that team because it wasn't just, it was Doc Rivers was always on the refs. Chris Paul was always on the refs. Blake Griffin was always on the refs. Then that started to infect like the role players, and like DeAndre Jordan started to get on the refs, and Matt Barnes was always on the refs. And it was just like this culture of berating the refs and always being on them. And refs, especially refs that have like retired and since done interviews, like have admitted that there have been people they've held grudges against because of how they treated them. So I think the Lakers are certainly in like the mix for team that complains the most. I think, again, like collectively it's been lower this year, but I think Jackson's another guy who I constantly reference as like, he's always on the refs. And, I think that Marcus is another guy. Like, they just got to be careful with that, right? Because that type of stuff does matter, especially if you're in a game 6 on the road in the playoffs and there's some 50-50 calls. Like, you don't want those going against you. So I think LA in general could do a better job, like not always going after the refs, especially, again, in my opinion, given that they typically get a neutral to positive whistle, but it's just kind of part of the DNA. And these guys run hot, they're competitive, and like, you don't want to amp that down. You just want to amp down the like going at the refs part of it. So you kind of live with it with just this group and who they have and whatnot. But yeah, certainly not a good officiated game. The Wannabe GMs podcast, Mathurin as the 5th guy. What would the trade look like? To be honest, I don't think Mathurin would be an ideal 5th guy for a couple of reasons. Like to me, it's basically like, it depends on the price, right? I think he is a guy that Indiana would ask for a first for. I don't think you're just getting him with a second. So that's its own conversation of like I don't think I think he's like a borderline first guy, but probably more of a 2 to 3 second round pick guy. And, but the other thing is that he's just not the level of defender you would want as that 5th starter. Is he better than Rui defensively? Yes. But then the flip side to that is Rui's a better shooter than Mathurin, and Rui is better playing off of the ball. And Mathurin is a guy, Mathurin to me is like ultimately more of like a high level 6 man. And it is unique in that he's kind of in that, I think he could have a long career being that type of player, but being it at like, at a bigger size in terms of like being, 6'7" or so, compared to like traditionally the Lou Williams, Jamal Crawford, Malik Monk, Jordan Clarkson type. Those guys are typically like 6'2" to 6'4". Mathurin's doing that at a higher level. Like there are teams he could start for, and like you could argue he is a starting level player. I just think he is more ball dominant than you would want as like the quote unquote fifth guy. Like maybe he even surpasses Ayton as the fourth guy, but still for what the Lakers, like if he was on the Lakers, I'd be advocating for him to come off the bench, not actually be the fifth guy. And then I just think defensively, he's not really close to being the caliber of guy you want there. Like I think there are matchups and times during their finals run where he was a negative defensively. So I think sometimes because guys like him are very athletic, people kind of project a certain defensive skill set onto him. But I would say he's closer to like an average, depending on the night, depending on the matchup, sliding somewhere from below average to slightly above average defensively. But that's not, I think he's more closer to average. And I want like, let's just say for giving him the benefit of the doubt here, he's like a 55th percentile defender. I want someone like 80th percentile or better. And the shooting is a big component as well, but you gotta be, I think, ideally like 80th percentile or better. Seb, thank you for the super chat. Thoughts on Rui, DK, Adu, and a first for Herb, Bay, and DeAndre. Reunite DeAndre and JJ. That was my first. This is a lot. I think I would do this, and I know this is going to be unpopular for a segment of the fan base because they're very high on Adu. I too am high on Adu. I also think that in the limited sample size we've seen from him, he looks pretty raw, and especially with Vando, like LA needs to add 1 to 2 players to the rotation. And I think Vando's also reemerging in a real way that realistically, I do not see a path forward for Adu to realistically emerge as like a key contributor. So now we could have the conversation, like there's a different conversation about like next season or the season after, but this is a young player who was off for 8 months, who's on a minutes restriction, and who is pretty raw on the offensive end. I guess it depends how confident you are that this type of move would propel the Lakers to contender status or higher up the contender charts. I think it would really help because in terms of the actual rotation, you are basically swapping out Rui for Herb and Bay, and you're starting Herb, and then you're adding Bay to the bench, and Bay can give you some, like, I think he then becomes the best offensive option off the bench, or at least the most consistent. I think he's a little bit more stable on that end than like Jake, for example. So then you start Ayton, LeBron, Herb, Austin, Luka. Love that group. Think that group could go toe to toe with Denver, Houston, San Antonio, probably OKC too, but like OKC again is on like their own kind of tier. So I want to be respectful for that. But then your bench is Marcus, Bay, Jake, Jackson, Vando. That's a big, tough, defensive-minded bench group. And you also have some, like, we're seeing Marcus come along offensively with his shooting a little bit. Jake has had some big offensive performances. Sadiq can score off the bench. And then you got the defensive side as well. So I personally would do this, but I typically err on the side of being more aggressive in trades. And I think Adu might be a couple years away from really contributing. Could be wrong on that. And that could be something where, like, ideally you could take Adu out of this and do some other version of the trade. But the only other version would be, I guess, Bronny. And I don't see that happening. Or Jackson. And I don't see that happening either. So I think this, I'll say, like, I don't know if New Orleans does this. New Orleans might want more, but if you look at it from the context of like basically Rui and a first for Herb and then Dalton and Adu for Bay, I mean, that's a major upgrade. And especially, like, I'll say this, Adu could certainly make this look bad in a couple of years. I don't want to deny that, but I think Sadiq Bey will be better than him for at least the next couple of years. Like this season, he is better than him. I would posit that next season he would probably be better than him as well. And then maybe a couple years from now, that's a little bit of a different situation. But I think Herb is a perfect fit next to Luka. I think he'd be re-energized in a winning environment with actual stakes. So this is one I think I would actually do, but I know I might be in the minority with a do, not to rhyme. Mr. Messenger, thank you for the super chat. Don't get people saying you are too critical. LAL should be held to the highest standard. Championships are won in the margins. Can't get complacent. Keep doing what you're doing. Fire show. I appreciate that, man. And to be clear, like I think Truth was coming at it from a good place, but I did notice that on, so it's funny to me because sometimes I feel like, I don't know why, but like my message sticks a little bit louder than some people's. Like Trevor and I both had, when we've talked about the starting lineup multiple times, and basically we've like Trevor's firmly been bench Rui, start Marcus. I have largely been on that side, but I've considered Jake just because of Marcus's lack of availability. But kind of like I went like Marcus, Jake, Marcus. And Jason has basically said that he only thinks Rui should be starting due to politics and to not upset Rui or like alienate him off the bench. And so, I mean, that's its own like kind of element or dynamic there. But like, then I get labeled like the anti-Rui guy, for whatever reason, or like the Austin stuff. Like Jason's called him a top 15 player in the league. I don't even think I'd go that high for Austin as a top. I don't think I would consider him right now a top 15 player in the league. But like I'm the Austin stan. I'm the Austin guy, right? So it's just interesting. Like I don't know if it's the way I deliver stuff or maybe the passion, the conviction sometimes I have with certain points I'm making. But I feel like we largely will say like different versions of the same point, and then somehow some of those opinions get like latched onto me when I know Trevor's very high on Austin. Jason's very high on Austin. We all agree that Rui should have a lesser role and probably come off the bench. Like, I think those are kind of obvious points, but somehow it kind of sticks with me. But I appreciate that. It does, it's nice to have the confirmation that people agree with what I'm saying and believe I'm, trying to be as truthful as I can. And that's just how I've tried to do this is like, I tell you exactly what I think and exactly what I feel. And I don't really know another way to analyze it. Cage Break, excuse me. Thank you for the super chat. Opinion on DeAndre Hunter would have to be a 3-teamer. This is another one where I think DeAndre Hunter's defensive reputation is a little bit ahead of where he's at. We actually discussed him on Lakers Collective, and Jason admittedly watches more Cleveland than I do. I've caught them here and there throughout the season as I'm trying to monitor the rest of the league, but I'm not watching Cleveland on a nightly basis. And Jason actually thinks that DeAndre Hunter is at the same level or maybe even worse defensively than Rui. I don't agree with that personally. I think he's better than Rui defensively, but I think Rui's probably better offensively, and whatever defensive upgrade you're getting is probably minimal or like not significant enough to sway things. So I point being like, I don't think DeAndre Hunter is good enough as the 5th guy either. I think he's more of a secondary defender. And when you have Evan Mobley, who's an annual defensive player of the year candidate, and you have Jared Allen, who has been one of the better rim protectors over the last few years. Like you got the Twin Towers back there, and you got some real defensive length and athleticism and rim protection. Like it's maybe going to make DeAndre Hunter look a little bit better on the perimeter defensively. So I think he's probably closer to just being a bench player in general, but I'm not I'll say this. If there's a way to give up Gabe and Maxi and keep Rui and bring in DeAndre Hunter, I'd be open to that. I don't even know if I would start him over Rui. Like maybe because he is better defensively, I would do that. But then, you're kind of again dealing with the politics of moving Rui to the bench, a new guy taking a spot, whatever. And it's not like a guy who's like clearly that much better than him if at all. I think it's pretty debatable who's the better player. So, I'm kind of like, I think Hunter and Mathurin are two guys who I just ultimately don't think are good enough defensively. Zach Wan, thank you for the super chat. Herb 8 steals, Keon 6 steals, my dream trade targets. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned them earlier as like those are the 2 home runs. If LA could find a way to swing those 2, that's the dream. Herb can guard 1 through 3. Keon can guard either backcourt spot and some threes, smaller threes, but that'd be great. All right, going 15 more minutes here until the 1:30 mark, and then I'm going to wrap. So if you guys got any questions, get those in. Madison notes that if JJ is going to play Rui starter minutes, he needs to be shooting 8 to 9 threes per game. I agree with this. And now, granted, like I think there's a couple of opportunities that Rui turned down. There was one in particular that I'm thinking about that I think it was in the left corner that he had a chance to shoot a 3, decided not to. I'm not like Rui shooting the ball at such a high level overall that I'm not really going to nitpick with that. But I do think in general, Rui is the bellwether. I always say that, like, if Rui's getting threes, that means that the ball is moving and the Lakers are collapsing the defense, creating those kick out opportunities. At the same time, I think Rui does have a bit of a propensity to pass up. Like, he wants open threes or at least like semi-open threes. And he will sometimes then leverage the closeout into a drive for like a pull-up midi. And he is really good at that shot, and he does make it at a high level. But with how good of a three-point shooter he is, I would pose that like I want him sometimes even taking semi-contested or even contested threes. Like I think he does have a little bit of a slower release, but he's that level of shooter that if he could swap 2 pull-up jumpers a game for 2 extra threes, like I would make that trade-off happily if I'm the Lakers. So I mean, I do think part of it is a function of the offense and the health of the offense. And I think LA continues to go through some stretches of being a little bit too pick and roll and ISO heavy with their stars. But yeah, Rui certainly needs to let it fly a little bit more. Kane Carter says, hey, Jovan, hot take. Moving Rui is a must. He's good, but replaceable. The team values him way too much. He's doing nothing outside of shooting. Also, I'd rather not have them have that awkward off the bench conversation. Yeah, I'm not fully there yet, but I'm close to being there with Gabe in that I think if Gabe is playing over Marcus, Jake, or Vando, I think that is actively hurting the rotation. Again, I think Gabe should probably be closer to the 10th man, but the minutes suggest he's closer to like the 7th or maybe 8th man. And I think he's just not contributing enough to, like, Vando's out there grabbing offensive rebounds, switching and wreaking havoc in passing lanes and pressuring guys. And he just has a certain level of motor and size and athleticism that Gabe doesn't have. Jake is out there crashing offensive glass, and at least like people can target his foot speed or lack thereof, but they can't target him from a size perspective. Jake, like we've seen even a guy like Kawhi, who Kawhi drops that shoulder into you, he's creating separation, not against Jake. Like Jake has held up well against big forwards and even some power forwards. Like he's a strong dude. And then you have Marcus, who, I mean, there's a reason why he leads the team in plus minus. He leads the team in on off. Marcus just contributes to winning, and the Lakers defend much better with Marcus on the floor. Gabe doesn't really have an advantage in against any of those guys. Like, probably the best screen navigator specifically of those guys, and like is the quickest, but I don't think he does it at an elite enough level to offset the deficiencies elsewhere. Now with Rui, I agree to an extent that it might get to a point where, like, because it kind of feels like Rui, like even Gabe, I will give JJ the credit of like, what was it, the San Antonio game? Gabe did not have a good game. JJ slashed his minutes a bit down to 14. He has shown, like Jake, he's slashed the minutes of at times. Marcus, I think it was more injury related, but his minutes were down when LeBron came back. Vando obviously fell out of the rotation. Jackson's minutes have fluctuated at times when he hasn't played as well, and they've even tested out Maxi or small ball. The one guy outside of, like, you know, there's the big three. Then you have Ayton, who is very clearly the best center on the roster. So, like, outside of those four, the one guy who's locked into a role every single night at a certain level, regardless of performance, is Rui. And I do agree to an extent that, like, I think it's like, okay, if this dude really cares about starting and like having a certain perception or a certain role, he's also in a contract year. I get it. Okay, you start him, but there should be a little bit more of a scale in terms of like a night like tonight. You know, he does hit the big shot in the fourth quarter, but outside of that was pretty quiet. You didn't really impact the game on the glass, was pretty bad defensively for most of the game. A night like tonight, instead of playing 33 minutes, like, again, they were shorthanded, so that's where it gets a little bit tricky. But, you know, could you have gotten a few more minutes for Adu, or could Vando played a little bit more? LeBron oddly rested a big chunk of the fourth quarter. Jackson only played 22 minutes. Marcus only played 28 minutes. He obviously fouled out, so that was a little bit lower. But, like, I just look at, I think Rui should probably have a baseline of like 22 to 24 minutes on like a bad game or a subpar game. And then obviously the range could go into the low to mid 30s on you know, the right night. But he's kind of locked into like 30 plus minutes every single night. And I just think that's, I don't fully agree with that. I don't think it's to the point of trading him, but you know, I guess we'll see how things continue to develop. Rod says 1:30. Where are you at? I'm in LA. I meant like 1:30 in terms of like an hour 30 of live time. Smokey notes, Hunter's better than Rui, tagging low man and closeouts, at rebounding, at chasing around screens. I could keep going. I mean, he's better defensively than Rui. I'm not disagreeing. I just don't think Hunter is, again, to kind of bring it back to the point I was making with Mathurin. I think Hunter is better than Mathurin defensively. But looking at some of their numbers quickly, I mean, Mathurin's defensive numbers are pretty bad in terms of his individual numbers. Hunter's, I think, closer to average. Hunter's been a slight positive. Yeah, I mean, so let's just say hypothetically, like to bring it back to the Mathurin conversation, Mathurin, let's just say, is a 45th percentile and like a slightly below average defender. I think Hunter is like a 60th percentile defender, maybe 65th, and that's still not good enough. Like, is it better than Rui? Sure. If that's the best you could do, I guess, but I think LA needs to aim higher for like an actual impact defender. And I don't think DeAndre Hunter, and for reference, DeAndre Hunter's shooting 30% on threes this year on 6 attempts per game. So I expect that to regress positively. Last year, he shot 40%. The year before, 38%. A couple years before that, 38%. So like, he does have several years as a high level 3-point shooter, but there's a big downgrade, I think, from a shooting perspective. All right, catching up here in the chat. Well, Jay Fish, thank you for the super chat. Team full of entertainers, tired of the comeback gimmick, play a full 48. I agree with you. I think that I'm trying to think of a gym analogy here because that's the first one that comes to mind. But it feels like I just think the Lakers don't have enough stretches of games where they try hard enough and are fully engaged and locked in. And because they're so talented offensively and have so much offensive firepower, they are able to just kind of joke around for 2/3 of a game, turn this, flip the switch and win. And that is unfortunately a lot of their wins. And that's why they have a subpar net rating and a subpar point differential for their record, right? Like, we didn't get into it on Lakers Collective, and just because I'm not the biggest fan of expected win loss, because I ultimately think like you win the games you win and you lose the games you lose, and like we can learn a little bit from expected win loss, but whatever. But the Lakers are leading the NBA in terms of they've won 4 games above expected based on their statistical profile. I don't know what it is off of tonight, but going into tonight, they were statistically a 13 and 11 team, or no, excuse me, a 14 and 11 team rather than an 18 and 7 team. And that speaks to their ability to have these comebacks. That speaks to their ability to win in the clutch. That speaks to their ability to, there is like a resolve and a resiliency with them that I think is very impressive. But at the same time, it's like I just think, and we kind of saw it in the OKC game. It was like, and even the San Antonio game a little bit. It's like, oh, this is what a real team looks like when they come out from the jump and are actually like locked in. And I think LA needs more reps and more of a mindset shift with that of like, hey, if you're playing Utah, yes, you're shorthanded, they're shorthanded. All right, you're probably going to win the game. But like, just beat them by 20. Can you just do that? Can you just beat bad teams by 20? Like that's what I want to see. Sky Falcon 5 says, always making my points more succinctly than me. The 5th guy needs to be a stopper, not just an okay defender to pull everyone else up. Yes. I mean, I think ideally this needs to be like an all defense caliber guy, or a guy who maybe more realistically is a guy who's not performing at an all defense level, because most teams with all defense guys typically are not for sale, right? So if that is the caliber of defender you're trying to get, like Tamani Kamara is not for sale. Kason Wallace is not for sale. Go on and on down the list, like, Caruso, etc. Like those guys are not available. So you probably need a guy who's like perceived to be underachieving a little bit defensively, but has the potential to ratchet it up in the Lakers environment to be that all defense caliber guy. I think Herb Jones checks that box. Like he hasn't been the same level of defender this year. He's looked better since coming back from injury, but that, I think Wiggins is another guy who not quite like all defense level, but has defended at a very high level, was the primary perimeter stopper for the Warriors as a starter and closer. Like obviously Draymond did his thing, and Draymond is the fulcrum of the defense, but Wiggins was the guy guarding Luka when they played Dallas, right? Like Wiggins was the guy guarding Tatum and Brown and defending them at a high level. That was a few years ago, but he's still young enough where I think that player is still in there and empowered in a certain role and given that task, right? Because Miami, they defend a certain way, and they have Bam and they have Davion Mitchell, and he's not necessarily asked to do that, but I think he'd be asked to do that for the Lakers. So yeah, I'm totally with you. I think it needs to be like a very high level defender, and probably ideally a guy who's more of a defensive guy than offensive guy. Like that's a real distinction here, where I still think Hunter and Mathurin, for example, are way more offensive minded than defensive minded, regardless of how good defensively they actually are. Herb is a guy way more defensive minded than offensive minded. Trucker, thank you for the super chat. Rui's a better 3-point shooter, but Hunter's a better all around offensive player, can create his own off the dribble and finding at the rim. That's true. Like I think, like thinking through it a little bit more, I do agree that Hunter's a better player, and that I'd rather in a vacuum have Hunter compared to Rui. I think it ultimately comes down to what's the price going to be. And again, can you maybe get Maxi and Gabe cobbled together or something like that to get a guy like Hunter? The only thing I have with this is like when I'm looking at role players, I think the creating their own shot off the dribble, and Mathurin does it at an even higher level than Hunter does. I think there is value in that. I don't want to negate that or like diminish that, but I think that's less of a need with the current roster and with the pecking order, right? Like, yes, if he's getting some of the Laravia or Vando minutes or Gabe minutes or whatever, I trust him. I have more confidence in him offensively. I have more confidence in him attacking a closeout. I have more confidence in him creating his own shot. But with this, like the thing, I think the lens to look at this through is like the role with the role with the starters, because ideally, you know, the player, the big wing or whatever that they acquire is the fifth starter who's playing 30 plus minutes a night. You are starting with the starters, obviously. You are closing, and you're obviously playing in different lineups depending on your versatility and how you fit. But the key with the starters is actually being able to play off the ball. You do not need a shot creator in that fifth spot because you have Luka pick and rolls, you have Austin pick and rolls, you have LeBron pick and rolls, you have Luka post ups, LeBron post ups. You have a menu of options that, like, fifth starter ISO or fifth starter, like, attacking off the dribble is like option number 8 or number 9 in the Lakers starters offensive menu. That's before I even mentioned like DeAndre Ayton lob, DeAndre Ayton short roll, DeAndre Ayton post up or deep seal. Like, the fifth starter is the fifth option. And so with any player, right? Like, you, of course, it's okay if a player can do more and is doing a little bit less and just kind of adapting their skill set. But I do think Rui is a better off-ball fit for what the Lakers need, in large part because he's a much better shooter than Hunter. And that's a big thing playing off of the fifth starters. Now, defensively, Hunter is a better defender. But I also think the thing with Hunter and a thing with Mathurin to a degree, I think the Lakers specifically need a type of defender who can guard 1 through 3. Mathurin to me is more of a guy who he's probably more of like a 2.5 to 3.5 defensively in terms of he can guard threes. He could guard some 2s, but not all 2s. He could guard some 4s, but not all 4s. And Hunter's more even like a 3 and 4 defensively. So that's where, again, those guys I think are not only not good enough, but also not the defensive archetype of what the Lakers need from the fifth guy, where Herb Jones guards 1 through 3. Herb Jones, tonight, he's guarding Keontae George. On Saturday, he's guarding Kawhi Leonard. On Tuesday, he's guarding Devin Booker. You do not want to put DeAndre Hunter or Ben Mathurin in those situations. Like, tonight, they would not have been guarding Keontae. Maybe they're guarding Kawhi. They're probably not guarding Booker. So that's where the defensive versatility really comes in. And that's what makes a guy like Herb so valuable. So I know we're specifically talking about Rui and Hunter here, but even if we say Hunter's a better player, even maybe a better fit, ultimately, I don't think he's what the Lakers specifically need for the fifth starter. Now, if they can find a way to add him without making him the fifth starter, that's a different story, and I would entertain that. But in the context of the fifth starter, I just don't think he checks enough boxes. Hey, Penn, thank you for the super chat. Thoughts on Isaac Okoro, Bulls realistic sellers? I like Isaac Okoro. I like him more as a bench player. So we talked earlier about LA getting the fifth starter and then adding probably another bench wing or 3-and-D type player. Doesn't guard like maybe down as much as I'd like ideally, but I do like, I think Isaac Okoro can be effective in a bench role. Now, if the Bulls are selling, the guy I'd want is Ayo DeSumo. And that's the guy that I think Ayo and Keon Ellis are really interesting because on paper, they're not starting level guys for like a contender or like a really good team, but I think they have the upside to potentially be. So I could, maybe it's starting Marcus and bringing those guys off the bench, but I do think there's a pathway to them making sense as the starter. I think the issue with both of those guys is I don't love either one of them against like big wings. And that's where I think there's a bit of a difference between Herb Jones versus them. But yeah, so I do like Okoro though. And the Bulls seem to be trending toward being sellers, although they have a history of entertaining mediocrity. And Right now, though, they're not even mediocre. Zach Wan, do you fancy Sohan, potential LBJ replacement? I am not the biggest Sohan fan. It's Jeremy Sohan in San Antonio. I think right now, he's fallen out of favor in San Antonio in terms of the rotation. So I think I assume you're saying potential LeBron replacement in terms of being like the starting four longer term. And I don't think Sohan right now has proven to be a starting level player reliably. I mean, clearly San Antonio views him as like a fringe rotation player. So I think he's probably a little bit better than that, but there are real shooting concern. Like he's sort of Vando-ish in terms of, I mean, he's basically San Antonio's Vando in terms of being a plus multi-positional defender, energy guy, high motor, good rebounder, kind of plays like, the 4, the 5, depending on their lineup, but is limited offensively. And because of them playing so much Wemby and or Cornet at the 5, it does kind of limit Sohan's just ultimate role. And like they need shooting for specifically for kind of their role players. And he just doesn't check that. So I wouldn't mind taking a flyer on him, but I don't view him as like a long-term starting option. Madison, any chance of Edwards wanting out of Minnesota? Longer term, potentially. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we'd be there. Maybe a first round exit starts activating the coals on that. But I think, they've made back-to-back conference finals. So, despite maybe them underachieving or underperforming in the regular season, they have probably overperformed and or like maximized their potential in the playoffs. Now, if he goes from conference finals loss, first round loss, maybe that's a little bit of, again, kind of like, hey, which way is this going? But I don't think it's something that happens before this trade deadline. And I think at the earliest it would be this offseason, but it probably would have to be maybe another first round exit for Minnesota. And then like 2027, he starts looking around like, where are we going? Sarah says, Jovan, do you think JJ benches guys for long stretches to light a fire under them, work for Jax and now Vando? Yes and no. I think it is partly a motivating factor, but I think that JJ really, again, we're talking about a couple guys who are limited offensively in terms of Jackson is specifically a threat around the basket, either as a lob threat, as a dump off for a dunk or a layup threat, an offensive rebounding putback threat. Vando, even more limited than that, up to this point. So I think it honestly speaks because I will say he's also benched Dalton, right? So he doesn't only bench offensively limited guys, but I do think it's interesting that the guys who are perceived to be better offensively, or the guys who have more offensive utility and value, specifically Rui, Jake, and Gabe, they are kind of locked into baseline roles that JJ refuses to is when Jackson goes cold or is fouling a lot or not protecting the rim well, and Vando, maybe like the lineup data is really bad with him. He's missing layups. He's airballing threes. It's like, okay, let's bench these guys. Let's reduce their minutes. But then again, like the guys who can give you a little bit offensively just are locked into certain roles. So I do think it's a bit of a preference where I think if JJ, like, I think if JJ, I've said this before, but JJ, like, I think if you want to understand JJ's actual like basketball philosophy, I think the team to study and the team to the team that he, I think, wants to emulate longer term is the 2024 Celtics. Like JJ, if you listen to his pod before he became the coach, and then if you've listened to any time he talks like actual basketball philosophy, JJ is a big believer in 5-out spacing, having a bunch of shooting, and driving kick game into kickouts and drives, and more kickouts and drives, and trying to play offense with a certain efficiency, and then defensively switch everything, have a bunch of versatile defenders. And, I think that 2024 Celtics team is like his like dream roster build. So I actually think if it were up to him, like Maxi would be good enough to probably play over Jackson and be that switchable big who could shoot threes. It's just Jackson's obviously played well and played better. With Vando, clearly he's tried to be like, let's get Marcus in a certain role, or let's get Gabe in a certain role. Let's get Jake in a certain role. And like Vando's obviously come in and been like, hey, there's certain things I can do that those guys just can't do. So I actually think it speaks more to like his basketball sensibilities than anything. But I do think to some degree it is a little bit of a motivating factor. I just think JJ's tolerance for guys who can't shoot is pretty low, and his tolerance for guys who can't defend or are perceived to be able to shoot and can't shoot is a little bit higher. Trucker says, thank you for super chat. I totally agree with you. Just signaling the Hunter Rui comparison. Herb's my number one trade target in guard 1 through 3, even some 4s. Rui, Wiggins my number 2. Okay, totally hear where you're coming from. You're just making a point on the Hunter Rui comparison, and we're in agreement. Those are my top 2 trade targets as well. Let me see one more here. Zach Wan, thank you for the super chat. 1, can we model offense like Nuggets and defense like 2023-24 Wolves, looking at our personnel? 2, if LBJ retires next year, should we take KCP for 20 million-ish? Depends what I'll answer the second one first, and then I will wrap here. KCP, or you said KP. I assume, who's KP? Is it, they're Kristaps Porzingis? Is this KC? I read KCP kind of quickly through it. Is this Kevin Porter Jr.? Like, there's a lot of different KPs, but maybe, based on the contract, I think Kristaps is making more than 20, so this might be KCP. I believe Kristaps is in the third. Yeah, Kristaps is making 30.7, and then he's an unrestricted free agent. So maybe you meant KCP here. If so, you said Porzingis. Okay. You're saying how much we should pay? They should pay Porzingis. Got it. I'd be interested in Porzingis. I think I don't love Porzingis if Ayton is still there. Like, I think there is a world in which they could play together in like a pretty scary Twin Towers lineup, but I don't think, for example, comparing them to like Houston's slow with their 2 bigs, but they go zone and they're really good at zone, and they're really good at still rebounding in the zone. OKC, Hartenstein and Chet, I think are collectively and individually better defensively than Ayton and Porzingis, but also more mobile defensively than Ayton and Porzingis, especially as a tandem. So I think if Ayton leaves, I would be interested in Porzingis. Now there's the whole Luka Porzingis dynamic of like back in the day, it seemed like there was a little bit of tension there. They since have seemingly made up, but I don't know where that relationship is at right now. But Porzingis is someone that I think is interesting, especially depending on the contract number. If you could get him at a 2-year, $40 million deal, I think that's pretty interesting. Now, in terms of modeling the offense like the Nuggets, I think it's a little tricky because they run so much offense out of the post and the elbows with Jokic, and LeBron and Luka can do that, but they're not 7 feet. So it's just like, it's a different, like Luka and Jokic are just very different players in terms of how they function. So Luka is going to be more pick and roll heavy and more ISO heavy at the top of the arc. And Jokic is going to operate more out of the post and the elbows, or as a screener and roller with Murray. So I just think it's Could they get to a similar level? Could they be as efficient? Could they take care of the ball as well? Maybe. I think naturally when you're a more pick and roll heavy team, that can lend itself to some more turnovers, as we've seen the Lakers struggle in like their losses. But I do think their upside can be on like that Denver level offensively, which is what they should be striving for. Because I think that's where, if you're the best or second best offense in the league, your margin for error defensively is higher. Like that's been the thing for the Lakers, is that their offense has been really, really good, but they're still kind of hovering around that like 5 to 7 range, where you'd like to see them get up into the top 3, top 2. And that gives, again, their defense some more room to not be as good. And then in terms of the Wolves, I just don't think they have the same level of personnel as the 2024 Wolves. Like, I believe that was the last year Rudy Gobert won Defensive Player of the Year. And while, if I'm not mistaken, that was the last year Rudy. So like, for as good as DeAndre Ayton's been defensively, I still think there's like, to me, there's still a couple tiers above DeAndre Ayton at least. And that's like your Goberts, of course, Wemby, your Hartensteins, your Chets, like those guys are just at a different level defensively compared to DeAndre Ayton. So I just don't think the Lakers have the personnel to have like the Wolves had Jaden McDaniels, and who is better than anyone on the Lakers defensively. And then I think Ant was better that season defensively. 2024 was the final Cat year, right? So they also had the Twin Towers look that they went to and was successful against Denver with. So yeah, I don't think the Lakers have the overall personnel. And Jones says Nah was better. I assume, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. All right. I'm going to wrap here, though. I naturally went 20 minutes over because I can't help myself. Love talking to you guys. But I will be back on probably not tomorrow. I am house hunting right now with my wife. It is very exciting. We're looking at a few different areas, but we're going to go look at a house tomorrow. Then my brother's in town spending some quality time with him. So probably not recording tomorrow. We'll be going live Saturday after the game, and then maybe a Sunday stream because I didn't do anything on Friday. But next time will probably be after Lakers Clippers. But appreciate you guys for rocking with me. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back on Saturday. I will talk to you all then. Shout out to the Late Night Gang. Shout out to the chat. Appreciate you all.